Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. This is a webinar on supporting math learners. As we go through, I'm going to stop my video and we're going to just focus on the slides at this point. So we have a team here at the Lincoln Intermediate Unit who has been producing content for all of these webinars. And this has been a team effort for all of us to employ this site for you and all of these opportunities for you. So I want to thank the team, and we'll continue providing as much professional development as we can moving forward. So we are currently looking at certain norms. As you've noticed, the chat function, the microphone and camera function has been disabled. This is because of the size and number of attendees that we've been going through to make the point that each of these pieces, we don't want to have anyone or any distractions as we go through these. If you have any questions, there is a question and answer pod, and the questions will be visible to everyone as we move forward. So please ask any questions. There are other members of the team on here who will work with me to answer any questions that you have. And please raise your hand if you'd like the microphone during the question and answer period. And there is a Act 48 credit link at the end of this for you to receive credit if you are a Pennsylvania teacher. Within our own resources at the LIU, we are offering Act 48, and you will be redirected at the end, and the link for Act 48 will be put up at the end of this webinar. There's also the webinar archives over at our LearnOn website, and you can read it, get to it through that bit.ly. And our LearnOn website has a lot more resources and varied resources that we can't fit into this short webinar. As we move through into online learning, we need to consider continuity of education. This is the idea that we want to either continue education or give enrichment and reinforcement, depending on the district's policies, that we are considering FAPE as we move forward, the free appropriate public education, and that we think about all students and make sure all students have access to what we are doing. So one of the things that we need to think about, and I'm going to talk about this more later, is priority and balance. That less is more when it comes to online education. That video is very important, and we can use video to reach our students. That we have our faces and our personality involved with what we do. It's important to maintain norm as much as we can for students. That videos should be no longer than 6 minutes. Most of our students need a very short amount of time for that. And that we have to be very clear with what we're doing. We have to be clear with our objectives and expectations. We should think about our tasks. How long is it going to take? And think about how long it was going to take all students, and consider how we can limit that time period. And that we need to really sequence instruction. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today. So there are two outcomes that I'm looking for this short webinar. The first is looking at the Oreo method for explicit instruction and how we can use the Oreo method and leverage good math instruction in. And the other is thinking about procedural and conceptual online learning. One of the things I wanted to bring up is this is our TAC team over at the IU. You have Becky, Corinne, and myself. We each have our strengths, but we're all here to support everyone. You can reach out and email us directly, and we will do our best to support you and help you as we move into this frontier of learning. So whenever we think about math instruction, we tend to think about these different areas: strategic competence, productive disposition, procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, and adaptive reasoning. We need to make sure that we're still teaching to grow each of these things in new instruction. And there are difficulties with these And we really need to think about how we're teaching procedural fluency to students, but not just focusing on that, but also focusing on the conceptual understanding. When we build these lessons with those in there, we can then bring in strategic competence and have them start using their strategies and figuring out what they're going to do. We have that adaptive reasoning that they can explain problems. And if we can teach them how to explain problems, it might be more beneficial in the long run. Finally, we have that idea of productive disposition. And this may not just be students, but it also may be supporting the productive disposition with parents. We need to think about how we're going to support parents as a support network and those people that don't feel comfortable within math and within instruction that we're doing. But with all of that said, we also need to consider Maslow and where students are and what's going on in their lives right now. We have to be very much aware of how they're feeling and what is going on in their personal world. So when we're thinking about instruction, we want to start using planning documents. We want to think about instruction as a week-long or a piece-by-piece method, not just thinking about what I'm going to have them do today versus what I'm going to have them do tomorrow, but how can we structure a week's worth of information and present that to students and be available for students. We need to consider our objectives and our criteria. And in this, we need to think about how we're going to set up those lessons. We may not set them up the same way that we set them up in a face-to-face environment. We need to sequence our lessons to make it easy for them. So one of our classic examples in math is the I do, we do, you do. So maybe we do an I do as a video for instruction. And when we think about videoing, we want to keep it, I said about 5 minutes or less. We can also give them worked problems. We want to make sure that the worked problems are there and that they are clear and have clear descriptions next to them. We want to have students practice. That we do is very important, but we may not be there for the we do, or we may send them the video for instruction prior to us getting in there and have our office hours, or if we have a face-to-face portion that we're asking students to attend, that may be where we do the we do, where they start to practice. And we want to keep those problems to a minimum. We want 3 to 4 problems, and then they check in. And even if we're doing this where they're more of a distance model, where they watch the video and they practice, I want them to practice, then send it in, and then check it. Because I want to make sure that they're on the right track before they do 50 problems and lock down these skills. I want to give feedback as quickly as possible, or feedback in the best way possible. Feedback could be a note from me, it could be an email, it could be an office hour. There's a lot of different ways we can give feedback to students, and we can find those. We have a webinar on face-to-face teaching to online that was given a couple days yesterday, and you can go back into that. And we want to give them, we want to release them as they understand the content. And that's going to be key, that we want to have them practice what they understand. And when they don't understand, stop the practice and come back. Because we don't want that them practicing each thing that they may not understand. So when we think objectives, we all are used to writing objectives, but one of the keys to this would be I can statements. And I'm only going to do 1 or 2 for each day, or 1 or 2 for multiple days. And I want these to be in very student-friendly language. And I want them to be parent-friendly. The I can statements, if they are parent-friendly and student-friendly, they're going to be able to use those to assess their own learning as they move forward. One example, I can find the area of a triangle. I want it to be that simple, and I want it to be specific skill. You want to have one, then another, then another. And maybe these build on each other, and I'm going to have multiple going through. But for each lesson, I'm going to be very, very specific in what I'm looking for. One of the things that we've been talking about with teachers is screencasting or recording prior to instruction. I may want to post a recording of myself going through and teaching the lesson prior to them doing any live instruction with students. Couple reasons here. One, if I'm just recording a class that I'm running currently, one of the things that might happen is students' faces might be on that. And I don't want to put anything up that has students' faces or pieces on. And also, if I record it prior to this, I'm thinking long term, I can then use that the year after. I could have a bank of recordings for parents to look at. So this allows us to come up with instruction that is set up and that I can edit so it doesn't have any of my mistakes. As we do live teaching, we know we all make mistakes when we teach it live, and sometimes we have to check things. We want to make sure that we have that live instruction, but we have a lesson for them. Work as teams. One of the greatest things that I've found and seen are groups of teachers coming together to create and build stuff for students. In your schools, if you're providing instruction, have a team make it. Each person puts together certain courses or certain activities, and then everybody uses them. We can get through this as long as we collaborate and work together. Use manipulatives. Think about what students have at home. Ask students, send out a Google survey. What do you have at home? Especially for our younger kids, they really need to be able to feel and touch the different manipulatives and move things and see things as we go through. They may not be the same manipulatives that we've been using in the classroom, but beans, just a bag of beans, that may help us. Something that they can count. If they have Legos, we can use Legos like Unifex cubes. We have a lot of manipulatives that may be in their household already that we want them to use. We also later on have a list of resources for virtual manipulatives that they can use if they are online. When we think tasks, think about the skill and the depth. We may need to think about the specific skill. In Pennsylvania, we have the eligible content, but we may need to break that eligible content down even farther to the steps to get to the eligible content. So we want them to be targeted specific tasks and build on things that they absolutely need to know. So think about wherever you're sitting. If you were the next grade teacher, what do the kids absolutely need to have on lock in their heads for this? And as we look through, give them step-by-step directions. Flow charting, you can find numerous pieces on flow charting, or give them visuals, or give them worked problems, or interleaved examples. Give them something that has step-by-step directions, but also has a visual. We want to hit multiple modalities, even though they're not in our classroom. My rule of thumb is determine how long you think it will take, multiply it by 2. So if you normally think that this took a day for you to teach for an hour, multiply that by 2. So basically take what you normally do and divide it even more so, because students need small chunks. So we may not get through all the methods of addition. We may just focus on using standard algorithm addition or repeated counting, or each of these, just to make sure, or just doing count on and make it clear. And we want to make sure that when we do these, we're using language that their parents can get. Discussion is also extremely important in math. We want to make sure that students still have the chance to discuss and work collaboratively. So one of the options is Google Draw. Google Draw is a site that allows you to have a drawing that multiple people can work on at the same time. Jamboard for education, it's not a pay option. If you have the educational Google end, you can use Jamboard. It's another online whiteboard. So you can have multiple whiteboards there. Google Slides, you can have kids collaborate on Google Slides and work together and kind of have a class discussion around it. If you're using Zoom, using breakout rooms, or you can have in the breakout room students using whiteboards. That is really going to be powerful for you to be able to have them discuss and talk about what they're learning. This is also part of that social, emotional, and community building piece. We want to make sure students have those options and have that ability, and that we can kind of monitor the math talk. We want students to work together as much as they can, and we want students to work in an environment that is welcoming for that. So that may mean that we need to think about norms and talk to students about how we act in these different rooms. Math discourse. Have students talk through the problems. One example for this may be Screencastify. Have them do some problems and then videotape themselves going through the problems and explaining it to you as the teacher, and they upload the video. Or using Flipgrid. Flipgrid is free. You can have students go through and do a number of Flipgrids where they're explaining the problem, or they're explaining their reasoning behind the problem to really check that conceptual understanding, or explaining why they use specific strategies, and have other students discuss with them and talk to them about what they did comparably. This may allow an asynchronous discussion in Flipgrid. Assessment is something that we really need to consider as well. We have to really lock down what we actually need to assess. Do we really need to assess all pieces at all times? Are we giving students a ton of assessments as we move through these? Or are we using a lot of formatives and kind of backing off on the end of unit tests, but really getting an idea for where they're at currently? We can consider, if we're assessing procedural knowledge, conceptual knowledge, the strategic knowledge, we want to highlight and lock down also what we're assessing, and maybe assess a lot less formally and have a lot more informal assessments. How are we going to assess this? We can assess it through written. Things like Rocketbook has free pages that you can print out and they can do the problem on and email it to you via the Rocketbook app. They can take pictures of it and upload it into a lot of these LMSs. We can have them record themselves via Flipgrid and a number of different options. They can use photo representation. And when we think about this, are we thinking about the family as a whole? When are we assessing them? Are we requiring them to be assessed at the same time in our classroom? Or are we thinking more as an asynchronous idea that the students have a window for this? There's a lot of different assessments, resources located in this PowerPoint. I'm not going to go into those because we're running low on time for the instruction piece. So the accommodations and modifications, we want to have multiple methods of instruction. Is everything going to be digital? Is everything going to be print? Are we considering how it shows up in print and in digital at the same time? How are we thinking about students with specific IEPs and 504s? How are we going to build that into our pieces? How are we going to meet with students? Are we going to have office hours? For some students, maybe have standing appointments that you want to check in with them on a regular basis because you know they kind of struggle because you've been working with them. And really support the parents. Their parents may not be comfortable with math. They may not be comfortable with what's going on. One of my favorite things to see is we're teaching everyone to carry the one. We really want to step back and support the parents in understanding what Common Core is and in understanding about why we're teaching certain ways. Here's a list of a number of manipulatives that are available. Some of them are Flash, so they may or may not work with iPads. And here are a number of other resources that have videos or examples or resources for you. So that is where we're kind of at this point. What questions do we have from the field, and what things are we thinking about or do you want to know? Pretty much all of the tools are located in the PowerPoint, and they are normally linked also in our LearnOn website. We also, Rachel, we're also offering um, office hours. If you look on the LearnOn website, we have office hours for that. When you're looking at students who don't have devices, if you look at math, by example, and if you're looking at algebra, by example, they're later on, we can use those for printing out. They're really awesome because they really work on the worked problem and step students through thinking about it. The Oreo method is, I will share my screen again. The Oreo method, we have that planning document in the Oreo method. So what the Oreo method does is it steps you down. This planning document is really awesome for this. This was put together, I believe, by our ed tech group. It lets you think step by step. What are the objectives? What are the success criteria? What do they have to do? You can use, if you need a little deeper into that, the solo rubric. That's one way of thinking it through. And you really, this will help you step by step through each piece, and take the time to really think about, okay, I'm going to go through each of the steps from objective to responsibility. How long do I think it's going to be? What accommodations are needed? Then what is my expectation of learning? How are they going to demonstrate it? And then finally, after thought about the demonstration, what is going to be our workflow, step by step by step? The resource that I said that would be pretty good for printing out is Math by Design or Algebra by Design. Their Math by Design is 4th and 5th grade. Algebra by Design, you have bits and pieces that may be 7th or 8th grade. So those might be beneficial. Also, I would look at Engage New York. That may have some pieces that you can use and print out for some of your students. It's an online, more or less, program that is free. So something to consider. Yes, Eureka is the paid version. Some things to consider is keep an eye on our schedule for webinars. We have one tomorrow and one on Friday. For math, we also have office hours. And if you have any other questions or need a thought partner, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to work with you and help you along. So what I would really appreciate is if you could go to the evaluation, because we look at these and we're trying to make ourselves better. And by you filling out the evaluation, that helps us. It also gives us some idea of other webinars that you might need. And if you're a Pennsylvania teacher, please fill out the Act 48. We want to give you credit for coming to these and working with us. Thank you again. And I know the students and the parents appreciate everything that you're doing. Give yourself the grace and think about how you can do things and get the support where you need it. I again appreciate you coming. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful day.